Japan once again whitewashes the coercive nature of its wartime wrongdoings and escalates its claim to South Korea's Dokdo Island in its new school textbooks. Seoul, in response, calls out Tokyo for its attitude toward correcting history. The second Summit for Democracy kicked off on Tuesday, an annual meeting designed to hold the rising authoritarian powers in check, including China. Co-hosting the summit, President Yoon is also set to lead the first leader-level plenary session on Wednesday. More eased rules related to coronavirus are underway here in South Korea, with the quarantine mandate expected to be reduced from a week to 5 days. Japan once again whitewashes the coercive nature of its wartime wrongdoings and escalates its claim to South Korea's Dokdo Island in its new school textbooks. Seoul, in response, summoned an official from the Japanese embassy in Korea and protested Tokyo's false claims. Our foreign affairs correspondent Choi Min-jung starts us off.
Japan has yet again approved the publication of textbooks that contain misleading historical claims. A textbook screening committee under Japan's Education Ministry on Tuesday approved 149 textbooks to be used in elementary schools from 2024. In some of the textbooks for 3rd to 6th grade elementary school students, Tokyo decided to dilute the extent of the coercion used in the conscription of Korean men during Japan's colonial rule. In a book for 6th graders, the current sentence, "Korean men were conscripted as soldiers of the Japanese army," will be changed to "Korean men participated in the Japanese army as soldiers, and conscription came after." Korean men were also described as young people who voluntarily joined the Japanese army. In another book, the term conscripted was removed altogether. The current elementary school textbooks do not contain content on the so-called comfort women, so not much is expected to have changed regarding forced labor. But in one of the textbooks from next year, the term "brought in" will be changed to "mobilized" when describing that a large number of Koreans and Chinese were forcibly brought into Japan. Japan has also further solidified its claim over South Korea's Dokdo Islets in the East Sea. More textbooks will describe Dokdo as being an inherent territory of Japan, or that Korea is illegally occupying the islets. Seoul's foreign ministry on Tuesday summoned an official from the Japanese embassy in Korea and strongly protested Tokyo's claim to Dokdo, saying the islets are clearly Korea's inherent territory historically, geographically, and under international law. It also expressed strong regret that forced labor is being described in a way that dilutes the nature of the coercion. The ministry urged Japan to behave more responsibly in educating future generations. As it says, having the correct historical awareness lays the foundation for establishing a future-oriented relationship. The changes in the textbooks come as the countries were off to a fresh start following South Korea's announcement of compensating Japan's wartime forced labor in the Seoul-Tokyo summit. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The second Summit for Democracy began in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday, an annual meeting designed to hold rising authoritarian powers in check, including China. Topping the meeting on the first day was a call for peace in Ukraine. Our Moon Hae-ryun has the details.
This year's summit opened with a preliminary session hosted by Washington on Tuesday local time to highlight the key themes to be discussed over the next 3 days. It kicked off with the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken stressing the need for peace in Ukraine. While Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was originally scheduled to join the session, he was unable to attend as he extended his tour of the war's front lines. In his keynote speech, Blinken reiterated his support for a plan to establish peace in Ukraine through the full withdrawal of Russian troops, and expressed opposition to a proposal made by China following President Xi Jinping's visit to Moscow last week, saying it would only benefit Russia. Blinken also led a session on empowering women in democratic society to promote gender equality. An issue highlighted during his speech was the online harassment and abuse that women and girls face, which showcased the Global Partnership for Action on Gender-Based Online Harassment and Abuse initiative announced at the first summit 2 years ago. Other key topics on the agenda included countering corruption, led by U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and strengthening unions between democratic societies. The main conference will be co-hosted by the United States, South Korea, Costa Rica, the Netherlands, and Zambia the following day, with each co-host leading a virtual live session on a variety of topics. During Biden's first Summit for Democracy in 2021, around 110 countries were in attendance. This year, around 120 countries will be taking part, including Taiwan, despite China's efforts to exclude Taiwan from such multinational events. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
And President Yoon Suk-yeol will begin his Summit for Democracy co-hosting duties on Wednesday. The South Korean president is set to issue joint opening remarks with the leaders of the U.S., Costa Rica, Zambia, and the Netherlands. Yoon will then host the first leader-level plenary session on democracy delivering economic growth and shared prosperity. The session will involve activists and figures from civil society. On Thursday, Seoul will hold a hybrid regional meeting representing the Indo-Pacific with a focus on tackling corruption. The Summit for Democracy was launched in 2021 by U.S. President Joe Biden to address the growing challenges to civil and political rights and human rights across the world. In response to North Korea's testing of what it claims to be tactical ballistic missiles loaded with simulated nuclear warheads, the U.S. says Washington will continue to build its defense capabilities against the regime's evolving nuclear threats. Our Lee Seung-ja has more.
Speaking at a virtual press briefing on Tuesday, U.S. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby says the U.S. will continue to build its defense capabilities against North Korea's evolving nuclear threats, adding that the regime has been ignoring Washington's calls for dialogue. According to Kirby, the U.S. has not changed its desire to sit down with the regime in Pyongyang without precondition to find a diplomatic way forward to the denuclearization, verifiable denuclearization of the peninsula. However, he added that Washington is aware that North Korea is trying to improve the capabilities of its ballistic missiles and will continue to pursue its nuclear ambitions. So in response, he says the U.S. will continue to make sure that it has the appropriate military capabilities and the appropriate readiness to use such capabilities to protect its national security interests and those of its allies, including South Korea. His comments come as North Korea has been testing tactical ballistic missiles capable of mounting simulated nuclear warheads. At the same time, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has reportedly been guiding the regime's nuclear program, calling for the expanded production of weapons-grade nuclear materials to further increase its nuclear arsenal. According to the North State-run Korean Central News Agency, Kim also called for flawless preparation for the use of nuclear weapons anytime and anywhere. Meanwhile, during a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing on a defense budget request on Tuesday, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said Washington and Seoul are working to strengthen their joint defense capabilities against North Korea's evolving threats. He also reaffirmed the U.S.'s commitment to providing extended deterrence for South Korea and Japan, stressing that the three countries are able to demonstrate their ability to respond to any North Korean provocation. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Japan is set to release more than 1 million tons of water into the sea from the destroyed Fukushima nuclear power plant this spring. Now, the International Atomic Energy Agency claims the plan is safe, but what are the risks for consumers? For more, we're joined by Professor James Smith from the University of Portsmouth. Welcome to the program.
Hello.
Good morning. First off, what are the potential risks of eating seafood from regions affected by Fukushima radiation? I mean, in terms of health and diet.
Well, we know that after the original accident in Fukushima in 2011, there was a big release of radioactivity to the marine ecosystem, and this led to levels of radiocesium in fish that were in some places above the Japanese regulatory limit. But of course, these seafood in Japan is checked before it's sold and not caught from those areas which produce high levels of radiocesium in fish. And so the 100 becquerel per kilogram limit in Japan is suitable and won't lead to big radiation doses to consumers.
Right, then that leads to our second question. I mean, what advice can you give to people who enjoy seafood and maybe get their produce from a contaminated area? I mean, what do we have to do as consumers?
Well, I have no problem with people eating food from the Fukushima area of Japan. So, for example, the 100 becquerel per kilogram level in Japan is a very cautious one. So it's about 10 times lower than the level allowed in the EU for imports of food. In the UK, recently, it's been changed so that Japanese food from Fukushima can be imported without further checks. So I don't think consumers need to worry.
Okay, then why does such environmental pollution like from Fukushima matter to those who don't eat seafood? I mean, why do we have to care?
I don't think it is. Of course, there are problems in the Fukushima area about relocating people to the areas that were affected by terrestrial contamination, which is less easy to control and avoid. But I think that this release of wastewater that is planned to happen in the summer is a very, very millions of times lower level than the original release in 2011, and it's something that happens in nuclear plants all over the world, including in Korea, and so I don't see that as a problem.
Then what efforts are being made now to deal with and manage man-made environmental pollution like the contaminated water from Fukushima? What are some of the efforts being done globally?
Well, I think that in nuclear sites all the world round, there's control over what's released. So it's not like it was 40, 50 years ago where there were much less strict controls on what's released to the marine environment. So the water before it's released from Fukushima will be treated, and that'll reduce the radioactivity to very, very low levels. And then they're levels that are much lower than I would expect to have any effect either on the ecosystem or on people's health. For example, we've studied fish at Chernobyl, so in lakes around the Chernobyl, including the cooling pond at Chernobyl, and even and they're at very much higher levels of radioactivity than we see around Fukushima. And we haven't really seen very significant impacts on the fish. Although, of course, in Chernobyl, there are still some lakes where you can't eat the fish.
Right. All right. Professor, thank you so much for your insight this morning and evening for you.
Thank you.
More eased rules related to coronavirus are on the way here in South Korea, with the quarantine mandate expected to be reduced from a week to 5 days. The Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasure Headquarters will announce the COVID-19 crisis level adjustment roadmap, which includes the criteria and time frame for adjusting the crisis level and relaxing quarantine measures. It's also expected that the government will align its crisis level with the World Health Organization, which is expected to lift its global emergency status in late April or early May. The mask mandate, however, is likely to remain at hospitals and other high-risk facilities. The South Korean president has directly addressed the country's long-standing demographic sticking point, the lowest birth rate in the country, now which threatens the country's future productivity. Our Oh Soo-young reports.
Overcoming South Korea's demographic challenges requires social trust through long-term, not short-term policies, according to President Yoon. The South Korean leader on Tuesday opened the first meeting under his administration of the Presidential Committee on Aging Society and Population Policy. It was the first time in 7 years that the nation's leader personally presided over the committee meeting. This underscored the severe demographic challenges that past government plans and an accumulated budget of $215 billion have failed to resolve over the past 15 years. pointing out that the low birth rate problem is rooted in social issues such as public benefits, education, jobs, housing and taxation, as well as employment conditions for women. Yoon suggested that past efforts to promote child-rearing largely failed due to short-sighted measures and policy blind spots. He showed concern that many workers at small and medium-sized businesses and workers who don't have permanent contracts find it difficult to enjoy existing parental leave and childcare policies.
우리 사회가 보다 더 행복을 키워주는 문화, 또 열심히 하면 잘 살 수 있는 문화로 많이 바뀌어야 됩니다. 지나치게 과도하고 불필요한 경쟁에 휘말리는 그런 문화가 고쳐지지 않는 한 저출산 문제도 근본적인 답을 내놓기는 쉽지 않다고 봅니다.
According to Statistics Korea, South Korea's fertility rate fell to a record low of 0.78 child born per woman as of 2022. The figure also marks the lowest birth rate among 38 OECD countries. The country's percentage of people aged 65 and older is expected to hit 20.6 in 2025, transitioning into a super-aged society, which casts uncertainty over the country's productivity and workforce in the decades to come. The Population Committee plans to pursue 5 focus areas to help raise the flailing birth rate, which include expanding quality childcare services and policies to help working parents look after their children. It will also focus on housing and financial support, welfare and tax benefits, along with healthcare services. Calling for a full review of current policies aimed at promoting a higher birth rate, President Yoon says stronger measures and intensive investment are needed to build up trust in state support for childcare, and to ensure that the joy of raising children and self-actualization can both be fulfilled. 오수영 아리랑 뉴스.
말씀 감사합니다.
For a look at the news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley joining us here in the studio. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning, Dami.
Let's start in Mexico and reports of a number of deaths caused by a fire at a migrant detention center.
Well, that's right. At least 40 people have been killed and over 24 injured in a fire at the National Migration Institute in Ciudad Juarez City, located near the United States border. Now, among the victims were migrants who had come from Central and South America, hoping to enter the U.S. According to authorities, the fire broke out around 9:30 p.m. on Monday local time. They suspect that migrants who had been caught earlier on Monday set mattresses ablaze in the facility after hearing that they would be deported. Now, the fire comes as the U.S.-Mexico border has seen an influx of migrants as Title 42, a restrictive pandemic-era border policy that gives the U.S. government power to eject migrants at its border, is set to expire. Turning over to the European Union now, as the 27-nation bloc has finalized a plan that effectively bans the sale of new fossil fuel cars by the year 2035. Now, the deal was made official in Brussels on Tuesday local time after a meeting between EU energy and transport ministers. It calls for a 100% reduction in CO2 emissions by the cut-off date for car manufacturers, which effectively prohibits the sale of new combustion vehicles. However, one exemption was made as Germany successfully campaigned to allow the sale of vehicles that only use e-fuels, which is a technology combining hydrogen and carbon dioxide to make synthetic fuels. The new regulation marks an acceleration of efforts to switch to electric vehicles and tackle climate change. Data show that the cars make up 12% of the EU's total carbon emissions. Meanwhile, in the Twitter space, CEO Elon Musk has announced a new set of changes. According to a tweet by the billionaire on Monday, only those with paid Twitter Blue accounts will have their tweets featured on the recommended For You page. The changes also restricts voting on Twitter polls to users with a blue check verified account. Now, Musk says the measures are the only realistic way to clamp down on AI bots that have flooded the platform. The bots have been an issue for years for Twitter, spreading fake news and spam accounts. The changes will be implemented on April 15th, with membership costing $7 per month when paying a one-year membership up front, or $8 on a month-to-month basis. And finally, a giant meatball made using extinct woolly mammoth DNA has been unveiled. Created by Australian cultured meat company Vow, the meatball was displayed at the Nemo Science Museum in the Netherlands on Tuesday local time. The meatball was created by inserting a mammoth gene mixed with African elephant DNA into sheep stem cells, which were replicated to grow. Now, the company said that the mammoth meatball was made to get people talking about cultured meat, seen as a sustainable alternative to real meat, and to raise awareness of climate change, as it's believed to have played a role in the mammoth's extinction alongside hunting by humans.
Good morning. We still need a thick jacket or sweater when we step out the door in the mornings. But after a chilly start, temperatures will warm into the 20s by the afternoon under sunny skies today. So daily highs will be 2 to 7 degrees Celsius higher than seasonal norms in most parts of the country. It will feel more like the end of April this afternoon. So it's another day with big temperature swings between day and night. So as you might have guessed, much of Korea will be covered with unsafe levels of ultra-fine dust today. And unfortunately, it looks to be even a dustier day tomorrow. Morning temperatures are 2 to 4 degrees higher than the same time yesterday. Highs will rise fast along with the sunshine. Daejeon topping out at 22 degrees. Daegu, Gyeongju topping out at 21 degrees. Gwangju will see a high of 23. Now, after a big warm-up in the afternoon, we are cooling down fast overnight, so do dress accordingly to avoid catching a cold. While temperatures continue to nicely warm up as we head towards the weekend, topping out at 24 degrees Celsius here in the capital. That's Korea for you. Here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. Do stay with us for more updates throughout the day. Thanks for watching.
너무나도 괴상 거기가 최고라니 그건 너무 환상 Come back home see me tapping your yo
Busan, Korea is already reaching the entire world. Like ocean waves that travel far and wide. It's Busan, the perfect World Expo city. Transforming our world, navigating toward a better future. World Expo 2030, Busan, Korea.
Arirang City has always been a highly informative and respected source of information, news, and analysis.
This is the only place where we have a dedicated TV channel in which to convey our messages as ambassadors.
Arirang's news, political, and diplomatic analysis, and its coverage of Korea's traditional and contemporary culture is a huge asset for the diplomatic and international business community. I sincerely hope that the next quarter century of broadcast will be even more expansive.
South Korea's experience in tackling COVID-19 and introduced a Korean new a Korean survivor of Japan's wartime sex slavery met with
extraordinary climate crisis and pledged to work with the EU to tackle the challenge.
The objective of its North Korea policy is
protesters gathering across the country to peacefully demand an end to hate and violence.
Arirang, what matters?
춥지 않은가요? 처음 태어난 이별에서 사는 우리 손잡아요.
We're here to make a new type of news. New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's March 29th here in Seoul. I'm Yoon, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Niall Song.
Morning, everyone.
And Park Ki-hoon.
Thanks for having me.
And both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. Now, we're going to start with the news feed. Every day, we make a news feed that covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. questions. And the first hashtag is Hiro, the zebra that escaped from a zoo and galloped through the streets of Seoul last week. Zookeepers explained Hiro had been going through a tough time after losing his parents back in 2021 and 22. He apparently got into a fight with a kangaroo living next to his pen and would refuse to eat his favorite snacks. After hearing his heartbreaking story, many people parodied Hiro by dressing up as a zebra. Some even used AI to create images of Hiro successfully escaping from the zoo. In just a day, the number of AI images of Hiro made on one website exceeded 1,200. And the second hashtag is mask sales. Sales of face masks have jumped last week, even when the mask mandate for public transport ended. Sales of face masks at Tmall, a leading e-commerce platform, jumped by 20% last week. And industry insiders explained consumers seem to still prefer wearing masks because of these three reasons. 1, in fear of getting reinfected with COVID-19. 2, simply out of habit. And 3, because of severe fine dust. And the third hashtag is fake ID. The Ministry of the Interior and Safety has developed a clever way to detect fake IDs. And this is to help business owners that had to suspend or close operations after mistakenly selling alcohol or cigarettes to minors with fake IDs. An official said the name and personal ID number on real IDs printed out from the year 2020 are tactile. Also, there's a special ink used on real IDs, so once people tilt the ID card, they can see the ticket pattern at the upper left change color from gold or green. You can also see a small picture of your birth date at the bottom left when doing this. Now, why don't we expand our news feed here to the studio? So Ki-hoon, what do you think about the government's efforts to better detect fake IDs?
Well, thumbs up to the government for finally taking action on this ongoing issue. You know, I had a few friends back in Sydney who used fake IDs to get their hands on alcohol and cigarettes, but they did end up getting caught and paying a hefty fine. And to all the minors out there, you know, I do understand your curiosity of wanting to drink and, you know, kind of smoke before the legal age, but let me tell you this, you have plenty of time when you become an adult.
You really do.
You will have plenty of time because, you know, we all know, yeah. So, but yeah, when you said IDs only printed from 2020 were detectable, so I was thinking, what about IDs that were printed before January 2020? How do we detect these kind of IDs?
And that's a really good question, Ki-hoon. And the Ministry of Interior and Safety said businesses should call 1382 or visit www.gov.kr to tell whether an ID card is real or fake. While a lot of netizens welcomed officials letting business owners know how to detect fake ID cards, many questioned whether they should be penalized for, you know, mistakenly serving minors. And what are your thoughts on this now?
You know, as Kyun mentioned, kudos for taking the step to, I guess, protect minors from their curiosity and themselves. But that question's kind of tricky because there's no formal guideline of judging people's heart and intent. And unfortunately, there are people out there who, you know, they just perceive it as more business and more money. So unless you can kind of tell which ones are genuine and which ones are not honest mistakes, then I don't know. It's a tricky topic. But in an ideal world, yes, we would not have to penalize for such mistakes.
Right, be more responsible with the choices you make. And here in Korea, if you forge or fabricate official documents like your ID card, you can face up to 10 years in jail. And do remember, one mistake could lead business owners having to shut down completely after mistakenly serving you for your mistake. Now, that was our news feed for this Wednesday, and let's now head into our main discussion. Today, we'll be talking about a growing market thanks to consumers in their 20s and 30s in Korea. It's an online secondhand market. Are you 당근? This phrase may come handy when buying secondhand products in Korea. That's because it's the lingo used by 당근 market users when they meet in person to seal the deal. 당근 market is similar to eBay or Gumtree. It's the country's largest online flea market platform and was launched in 2015. It allows people to sell secondhand items within a 6-kilometer radius. And the main drivers of that growth are people in their 20s and 30s. In 2021, an insurance management agency, Goodrich, did a study on 1,000 people in this age group. It found that 83% said they've tried buying or selling secondhand items. 3 out of 10 of them said they've done it at least 6 times. Department stores have been catching on to the new gen's consumption patterns. That's why from last year, more and more have been opening up secondhand pop-up stores. Today, News Gen looks at 3 questions. 1. Why are millennials, Gen Z, and Korea into buying secondhand products? 2.
2. What are the most popular products sold or bought at these secondhand items markets? 3. How is the secondhand market in Korea different from abroad?
The secondhand market was one of the few industries that flourished despite the pandemic. As a matter of fact, 중고나라, the forefather of Korea's online secondhand goods exchange platforms, hit a milestone of $4.4 billion in 2020, which was also the peak of the pandemic. So first, here in the studio, I would like to ask whether our panelists have also tried buying or selling secondhand items, starting with Niall.
Yes, I absolutely love the secondhand market. I've gotten cameras, clothes, shoes, cat items, furniture.
Wow.
And yeah, I love the secondhand market. And during the pandemic, I made hundreds of dollars selling things
Really?
that, I was just bored sitting around. I'm like, I could sell that, and just sold a bunch of things. My husband is also very into the secondhand market because he sells his games that when he's done playing, he would sell it and then buy new ones, secondhand new ones on the market.
Wow. And what about you, Ki-hoon? Did you ever try this?
Me? I just checked my 당근 sales history and I sold 3 items in total.
Wait, only 3?
Only 3.
Okay.
So I'm not a 당근 person in general.
Okay.
I sold a mouse, a Bible, and a cake gift voucher.
Hold on.
Bible, okay.
You sold a Bible on the second...
Well, I'm not Christian to start off with, and I got it as a gift, so I thought, I might as well just sell it at a very cheap price for someone who actually needs a proper Bible.
Yeah.
Like a brand new Bible.
Okay.
So I did something good, right?
Oh, yeah. You're saving somebody else's soul through the secondhand market.
Anyway, with secondhand clothing, I don't really buy secondhand clothes. I used to in my 20s when I couldn't really afford brand new ones, but nowadays I'll just mix and match my outfits with what I have. And it's surprising to see people like Niall who make a lot of money through these selling of secondhand items with me, but I just like to buy brand new items because it's one way for me to get motivated to work harder and earn more money in general.
So you haven't tried it as much as Niall.
Not really.
But you are well aware that this is a growing trend among millennials and Gen Z, right?
Yes, I am a millennial myself, I think.
Yes. Then explain to us how big of a trend it is.
Well, it is a huge trend because as we live in a time of high cost of living, more millennials and Gen Z's consumption pattern has changed accordingly. So first of all, we think about the cost effectiveness of goods. Instead of purchasing brand new expensive products, as long as we can get our hands on the trendy hit items, it doesn't matter whether it's used or not.
Yeah.
And secondly, we do have a lot of interest in the environment. So, buying already purchased products can be a way of reducing, finite resources we already have. So, and getting something that we already want. And I think it can be that notion of catching two birds with one stone. Sorry about that.
Two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
You're being a smart consumer. And Niall, I would like to ask how you think how big of a trend is the secondhand consumption market amongst us in the 20s and 30s?
There are many different platforms of secondhand items in Korea, but amongst them, there's 중고나라, which is one of the oldest ones. And let's take a look at the screen. This graph right now shows the different groups of users according to their age, and it's quite obvious that millennials and Gen Z make a huge portion of this. According to the survey done in 2021, 61.1% of the users are those in their 20s and 30s.
Wow.
And those in their 40s made up 25.1%. 9.8% of the users were in their 50s, while people under 20 made up around 4%. And all this to say, to summarize, that the new generation loves a good deal.
They do, because 6 out of 10, those in their 20s and 30s, make up a big amount. So what are some main reasons behind this growing consumption pattern?
I think Ki-hoon mentioned we want to try the new trendy items, but it's kind of burdensome, financially burdensome to try and buy all the new products, different types of cameras and phones and things like that. So you can get them for a little cheaper, but, still in pretty good shape on the 중고 market, which is the secondhand market in Korea. And you have too much of something, then you can give it to somebody else, like Ki-hoon selling Bibles, and help others.
And gift vouchers.
Yeah, and gift vouchers. And you can get things that you need. Maybe you're missing that one Pokemon sticker on your collection. You can find it there. It's all there. And there's no pressure about the whole nice thing. You know, getting a used couch, you're like, ah, okay, you know, there's no pressure. I can get it a little dirty, and I like that.
And that's a really good point there. But at the same time, there are people like you, Ki-hoon, who don't really use the secondhand market. Why is that so?
Well, you know, a long time ago, there was a Korean superstition where used things had the owner's distinct smell,
right.
past memories, and even the spirits inside them. So people kind of avoided using, you know, used items. And also, there is a possibility of being scammed. For example, you know, people might sell fake goods saying that it's real, like genuine. And because nowadays, you know, these products, they look almost identical to the real ones.
For sure.
Okay. And lastly, you know, some people just don't turn up in person to make the transaction. And they just ghost them, and by not just picking up their phone and just not replying to the text messages. So you got to be careful when you do these kind of things.
And you're referring to like luxury goods being sold but looking identical, right?
Right, yeah.
And they're being sold at ridiculously high prices as well.
Super high priced, yes.
And that goes against the advantage of shopping secondhand, which is an affordable price. But why don't we now find out whether this is a distinct consumption pattern among the new gen just in Korea, or whether it's a global trend right after this. To find out whether secondhand consumption is just a unique trend among millennials and Gen Z in Korea, we've prepared an interview with a global millennial. It's Lee Roddy, originally from the United States, who's living in Seoul at the moment. And this is the second time we've had you on our show, Lee. Great to have you again.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right, Lee, so the first question I'd like to ask you is secondhand consumption or thrift shopping common in the States as it is in Korea? And how's it done there compared to here?
Yeah, to start off, it's really common. It's been common for a long time, so much so that I was actually really surprised when I came to Korea. And the only thing secondhand were these vintage stores. They were vintage, but it was just a way to go buy old things that were 3 times the price. So I'm super thrilled that this trend has really taken off here in Korea, because when I grew up, does anyone remember garage sales?
Oh, yeah. I love garage sales.
Yes, I do.
Yes, a good taste of home. It's basically setting up your home to be like its own little marketplace. So we had those growing up, and of course, we had thrift stores as well. In high school, I think that was a really common thing to do because, you know, you want to buy clothes, mom and dad aren't giving you a lot of money, and so you have to find, you know, cheaper, more thrifty alternatives to, you know, be fashionable at high school. So yeah, I'd say it's pretty common. And when the internet started as well, I think that the first e-commerce sites were actually secondhand sites.
Definitely. And here in Korea, have you ever tried it out? And what was your biggest catch or your biggest fail?
Oh yes, I definitely tried it out. I think my biggest catch was actually a pair of designer boots.
Wow.
I got them at about half the price. And the thing is, they had only been worn once. Someone had imported them and they put them on, didn't fit their feet, and so they gave them away basically brand new. I mean, sold them brand new, but that was definitely a big catch. And I also think that that's one big distinguishing factor maybe between what's happening here in Korea and where I'm from. It seems that the secondhand market really emerged revolving around designer brands. And it's expanding now, but I still think that that's a very big part of the secondhand market. Whereas I think in the US, it's pretty much anything.
But as Ki-hoon mentioned, a lot of people try buying secondhand items that are luxury goods, but it turns out it can be a scam, right? So what do you think are the pros and cons behind secondhand buying, and why do you think a lot of millennials and Gen Z still do it, regardless of sometimes consequences that they don't even expect?
Yeah, sure. There definitely are cons. I actually feel, you know, pretty emotional about this one because just last month I was actually in Singapore helping my aunt move countries. So we had to sell all this furniture really quickly, and I was using their country's secondhand app. You know, very similar to how it works in Korea. But we had a lot of antique furniture, and I found that, you know, to sell it quick, you have to sell it at a low price. But that means, you know, you want to make sure that it's going to someone that you think is going to use it. That's going to like have it, you know, really appreciate finding it. But I found that a lot of furniture companies that sell secondhand, they're like scouring through these sites to try to snag like a really cheap antique deal. And it's not necessarily a scam, but I guess it's not exactly how or who I wanted to sell my furniture to.
Yeah, definitely.
But I would say that the pros are, I think that it feels a little empowering when you're managing your own buying and selling, especially when you sell, right, Niall? You kind of feel like a little bit of a businesswoman, a businessman of sorts.
There's a thrill.
Yeah, it's really exciting when you make your first sale. So I think that's definitely one thing, the empowering factor with the younger generations. And I would also say that there's probably an aspect, especially with me, of this feeling of sustainability. I don't like to just throw away stuff and buy brand new. There's this feeling that I'm consuming so much. So buying secondhand is a way to kind of manage that guilt. You feel better about yourself.
Yeah.
And I hope the points that you made, Lee, can sort of convince our Kyun right there.
A little.
That's right.
You were a little convincing.
I know, because he's only sold 3 items there.
Yeah, and one of them should have been given away for free. You're selling a Bible?
We're guilt tripping him, yes.
I'm going to repent after the show.
All right. Thank you so much, Lee. It was a pleasure to have you here again.
Thank you, Lee.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, Lee made a lot of fascinating points, a lot of relatable points, as a matter of fact. And now, which point caught your attention the most?
I love that he said that it's empowering. I didn't realize that's what it was, but that's what it is. It's empowering. It makes me feel good that I made money off of something that I could have just thrown away or like given away for free, but I got something out of it. And if I find something, like how I thrifted this, I could go through many different items and just find that pearl in the dirt. And it's the thrill. You guys got to understand this.
It is definitely a thrilling experience, but there's definitely some drawbacks, as you mentioned before, right? Like the experience that you have with people. What did you think about what Lee just said there?
I'm for everything he said. It's a way of, doing business as well. And the fact that people who actually need that item, you're giving it to them at a really, nice, good bargain price. But so I'm thinking, maybe I shouldn't have sold the Bible. I shouldn't have just given it away. But that's what I do. I like to just give away things. There's a huge trash can in front of your houses where you can just throw away clothes and shoes and whatnot. So that's where I put my stuff. I don't go through the trouble of trying to sell it, trying to make money. So that's my way of selling or giving things out. But what Lee said was very true.
And it was quite convincing, for sure.
It was.
And all right, why don't we now include our viewers into our discussion topic? We always choose 3 of their comments. So if you take a look at the screen, you can see what they had to say on our topic today. And Mia at Japan said, in Japan, we often buy or sell used items like clothing, cars, books, and so on. For expensive items like cars, we use brick and mortar stores, but for other things, we use flea market apps. And Kit7 said, in India, there's a big industry for secondhand items. We sell anything and everything. Jia Wei Kai said, in New Zealand, we have a website called Trade Me, which allows people to buy and sell secondhand items. So it seems like it's not only something here in Korea, but something global right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole world doing it. Lee just mentioned there's one in Singapore as well, United States and New Zealand, India. Everyone's in on it. Come on, Yoon, you gotta jump into the market.
You know what? I'm with you on that one, Niall.
Okay.
All right, so after we wrap up today's broadcast then, any plans for more secondhand buying? And now I would also like to ask, this is a personal question. You've done it so many times.
Yes.
So I think you're like the master of secondhand
master.
buying. Any tips you'd like to give us?
Oh, yes. Meet in person. Try to meet in person, and there's so many scammers out there, and I've been scammed before, but this is possibly why 당근 is so popular, because it kind of gives you that, sense of you're trading with your neighbors, so you can't get scammed that badly because you know where they live.
Right.
And so you should go and check your item, ask them questions, research the item also. Don't just go blindly do it and send the money to somebody you've never met and who might never show up.
Right. You need to do a lot of research, and you should communicate to who's going to be purchasing or selling with you beforehand. And Kyun, what about you? Have you been convinced to do any secondhand buying?
I have been quite convinced, and I might just go back to my Open My Tangan app and just, maybe not buy, but maybe sell things that I don't really need at a much cheaper price for people that actually need this item more than me. And I think, if you have the intention of making money as a means of investment through these kind of secondhand buying and selling, be aware of the terms and conditions for each platform so that you can be legally protected when you do get scammed.
Yeah.
Because
That's a good idea.
I've seen many people get scammed,
Right.
and they couldn't do anything about it because people would just ghost or just delete their accounts. And it's really hard to track those people down. So know what you're going through before you actually start trying to make a lot of money.
And I think you ended off with a really fascinating point right there. The secondhand market isn't just about securing a really good deal. It's also about making a really good investment.
It is, yeah.
All right, and my tip for you guys is to think plenty and research heavily before making any purchase, whether that be for a completely new item or a secondhand product. And we'll be here every day from 9:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you the topics that young people are talking about. Special thanks to Niall Song. Thank you. And Park Ki-hoon.
Always a pleasure.
And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.
I'm live.
저를 도와주시는 분들이
저희와 함께 해주시는 세션분들
아무리 봐도 이거 없지. 펜션 같은데 아니라고 아무도 안 하는 거고.
좋아요.